Good morning, good lunchtime. It is noon, so you can shift your day. I hope your day is going well. If you're like me, you have a punch list that's a mile long of things you have to get done. So let me just thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to be pushed a little bit harder, a little bit more aggressive, maybe into who you are and what you're doing and how you're leading. So we're continuing our conversation. We're continuing that discussion on leading to grow and growing to lead and examining the type of leaders we are. So today we're going to look at the fine line of pragmatism as it relates to leadership positions, whether it's that position of I'm leading so I grow a business, or I'm leading so my team gets better, or you're in the position where you're growing, you're looking at your own self so that you can simply be a better leader, a better husband, better wife, better coach, a better friend. So today we're going to look at the pragmatism related to both of those, and maybe then even dive into some of the understanding of maybe 5 other styles of leadership, but to really reflect and ask ourselves the question, which one is really me? Which one am I really doing? Which one am I really being? And what am I doing to be better in my leadership? So as we get started, let's examine leadership styles. And as we do, we understand that they vary. They often vary based on our own objectives, or even our own drive, our own discernment, our own worldview, our own understanding. Sometimes we are a specific leader for a specific time, for a very specific person. You're very pragmatic. Your ends justify your means. That's why you're doing it, and you're going to move forward. So before we look at leading to grow or growing to lead, let's look then specifically at what are really 5 big categories of leadership styles. So as we examine these 5, we understand that sometimes we have to start at the back end and move forward. So am I being pragmatic, or why am I doing what I'm doing? Am I simply just trying to get to my end objective, or what kind of impact am I making along the way? So the first of the 5 styles of leadership that I want to look at is authoritarian leadership. And we can understand out of authoritarian leadership style, we can hear it in there. We hear that one single voice posing how we do things, and they even set forth and impose expectations, and those expectations then have the defined outcomes. So a person's ability can show how successful they can be, maybe in a situation when the leader is the most knowledgeable person in the room. Maybe it's easier then to be the authoritarian leader. So what we recognize, though, is also anchored to being that authoritarian person. This sometimes is an effective strategy if time constraints are there. But what happens then, creativity will be sacrificed along the way. What that does, though, when that authoritarian leader takes over, all that they're doing is pushing for the team to get further ahead without the voice of many, and many of that creative thought or direction helping aim them. So the authoritarian leader is a style which is also used when team members just need simple, clear guidance and they need to get stuff done. So let's look at each of these 5 categories, but let's also look at the advantages and the disadvantages along the way. So one advantage can be time spent on making crucial decisions can be reduced. That one single voice has time to think through it on their own and make a decision and move forward. But what can happen, though, is either chain of command is clearly emphasized, or it is decentralized, meaning the person that is really the ultimate authority isn't involved, and that other person just subjects themselves in there and makes those decisions, which can sometimes create chaos. So I apologize, I'm getting also some of the advantages at the same time here. But the third advantage of this authoritarian leader is the mistakes that are made can either be neglected. There's less mistakes. One person who's in charge of it all is making those. So the mistakes in the implementation of the plans can simply be reduced. So using authoritarian leadership style creates then sometimes maybe a steady or more consistent result based on the worldview or value set of that one mind, that one voice. So as we look at these 5 styles, let's also look at the disadvantages. So a very strict leadership style can sometimes lead people into rebellion. Man, I don't feel like I have a say, or I don't feel like I have a voice, or they don't really care. They don't want to know our thoughts or our ideas. What we recognize is those feelings and those thoughts then also kill those employees' creativities and innovations. So innovation is what's going to be that brilliant thought that helps move a business or an organization forward. So the third disadvantage is it reduces group synergy, group energy, group dynamic. It's whatever that one voice says, and then sometimes also the collaboration diminishes and nobody speaks up. So the fourth disadvantage would be this: group input then is reduced drastically. So the authoritarian leadership increases employee turnover rate. So if you have a business and you're trying to figure out why can't I keep people? This conversation is for you. Starting to look at what's going on. Which of these 5 leadership styles do I most impart, or they define me? So authoritarian, particulative, like, so you're just looking at some particular things that you need to get done. Delegative, transactional, transformational. So let's look at these other 4. So when we understand this this understanding of leadership, when I just got this particular point of view and all I can do is root and find that as the conversation, we understand then the conversation gets more involved from the standpoint of how am I diminishing that conversation. So the essence to involve your team around you in the decision-making process needs to happen when you'd have different parties involved. So if I can come to the table and I can embrace more of a democratic theory of how I lead, I get people's opinions, maybe 2 totally different sides of the same coin. Though team members thus feel included, they feel engaged, and they feel motivated to contribute. The leader will then normally have the last word in that decision-making process, though, however, we see that there are also sometimes disagreements within that group. And sometimes in those disagreements can just eat away at time, and the process of how that meeting is led or that communication takes place starts to dissolve. Though what comes out of this place where you have 2 different parties, 2 different opinions, 2 different conversations, you then start to see some of the own devil's advocate-esque questions that will help you maybe communicate or answer deeper rooted questions in how you lead. So the quick advantages. So it increases employee motivation and job satisfaction. They feel like they're involved. It encourages the use of employee creativity. They get to exercise their right brain, their thoughts, their problem-solving skills. A participative leadership style helps this group understand and engage in the creation of the whole team being strong. So here we then leave off with this high level of productivity can be achieved because people are energized. Now remember that energization that takes place, there can also be a disadvantage. The decision-making process becomes very time-consuming. Leaders have a high probability of being apologetic to the employees when they shut them down or have to apologize for the 2 different sides of the same coin argument. We also see communication failures happen at these moments, and sometimes it's just how the information is being communicated falls short, so therefore there's lack of clarity, lack of understanding, and sometimes then emotions come into play instead of just business clear decisions. So we see the 4th disadvantage is security. Issues arise because of the transparency of information that is being shared. Yes, there should be transparency, but we need to understand transparency in a conversation of authenticity. So the 5th one is this then: poor decisions can be made if the employees are simply unskilled. They're voicing their opinion, but they don't really have their hand in the professional side, or what I should say is the depth of the professional's understanding. So also known in the 3rd leadership style is delegating. I wrote it as delegative leadership. So sometimes this ability to delegate is a person who often tells people what to do, but they're not a real good team member themselves. So sometimes this person, though, can be successful in the strategy if the team around them are competent to understand what they're after, what they want, and they can understand the end game. So we also understand this person is most successful when they take responsibility and prefer engaging in individual work. However, though, disagreements among the members may split or divide the group in understanding of what's going on, leading then to poor motivation and low morale, which we understand low morale also occurs when people feel like they're the only ones doing the work and someone else is just barking out commands or orders. So the advantage to be somebody that can delegate well and understand that leadership well, we understand they might have a team of experienced employees around them that can take advantage of their own individual competencies and experiences. The second advantage is to understand innovation and creativity is highly valued because you're giving away work, and how you give it away doesn't necessarily maybe have the list of how to, just the freedom to get it done and execute it as you see fit. So the leader that delegates well creates a positive work environment if at the same time they don't micromanage or be that person that's the armchair quarterback from the other side of the game. So the disadvantage here is we understand the command of responsibility is not properly defined. Who's doing what? The roles and definitions. The delegating leader also might struggle in how they create or come through difficulty in adapting to change. So in our fourth leadership style, and we're going to get to why these all matter, because you and I typically aren't one of them. We're encompassing many aspects, and sometimes it's even driven by the subject of what we need to achieve. So when we look at a transactional leader, here's where I think we need to really weigh ourselves. And many times this kind of leader sounds more like a parent or even a coach. The transactional leadership style uses just that, transactions between the leader and their followers, hence rewards or punishments or other types of exchanges to get the job done. So the leader here needs to set clear goals, and the team members then therefore need to be able to ask good clarifying questions to understand what the direction is so that they'll know how to reach and achieve the reward for their compliance and their understanding of what they're doing and executing. This is simply a give and take type leadership style. And what we need to understand, it's more concerned with following the established routines and procedures than it is maybe necessarily an efficient manner of leading. We also understand that the transactional leadership style is often one that brings organizational changes and transformation to the entity as it's actually moving. So the advantage here is leaders create specific, measurable, time-bound goals that are achievable for employees to hit. The employee then themselves have motivation, and productivity then is therefore increased. Transactional leaders have the ability to eliminate or minimize confusion that can arise with chain of command type given directives from leadership. Transactional also helps create a system that is easy to implement for leaders, and it's easy for the follower as an employee or somebody that's receiving the task to ask questions back and to have clarity. They know the goal, they know the outcome, they know the reward. They have all three things to move ahead. Employees then can choose, do I want to partake in this reward system or not? The downside is if I don't perform, I then get X, Y, or Z, ultimately fired if I don't do it. So we see here then the disadvantages are often taken from a whole nother kind of a conversation. The disadvantages, innovation and creativity have been minimized. There's the target, there's the go get it. How am I going to get there? Doesn't matter. I just got to get it done so I get paid or I get the reward or I get to check the box. Along the way here, we recognize the disadvantages. Empathy is not valued. Transactional leadership creates more of a follower boss kind of scenario than leaders among employees scenario. So hence why you can see why it's effective means of how oftentimes parenting takes place. Transformational leadership, though. In transformation leadership style, we understand the leader inspires his or her followers with a vision. Mind you, that needs to be a clear vision. It needs to be one with clarity and understanding of how to move forward and how to understand what's going on. So again, the leader inspires his or her followers with this vision and then encourages and empowers them to go after it, go get it, achieve it. Again, in all of these, we're trying to minimize the micromanagement and put the emphasis on how that person that's receiving the directive or the understanding of what needs to be achieved, the leader then helps serve as the role model of the vision. And the advantage here is It leads to a lower employee turnover because the people have stake in it. They're doing something. They're actually bringing about the change in how the transformational leadership has been given them directives. So these leaders, though, also place a very high value on the corporate vision. There's high morale among the employees, and it's often even expressed to them. They're encouraged along the way. We understand the use of motivation and inspiration to gain the support of an employee is imperative. It's the difference between loving what you do and liking your boss. If your boss is just that, they're just always giving you orders, but there's never any collaboration, any thought to express your own ideas, any growth through team sharpening one another. We understand then the leadership style from a transformational perspective then puts a high value on the place of relationships in that entity and in that organization. We see this morning the disadvantage of a transformational leader. Leaders can deceive their employees. They can pull the wool over their eyes. There's oftentimes areas of suspect. Consistent motivation and consistent feedback are necessary. They may be required to keep this whole leadership style moving. Tasks can't be pushed through without the agreement of employees. The incentive has to be there on the other end of the information given. So transformational leadership can sometimes lead to the devastation of all that's there within the organization, from protocols to regulations that you have in place. So here's where we're going to pause and look at these 5 distinctions for just a moment and help us understand the very picture of how that relates to us. Oftentimes when we are in leadership, we are doing, acting, being without even pausing to step back to a higher view to see how it's going. We have to ask clarification questions. And when I ask us to address and look at, am I leading to grow? Am I growing to lead? I'm asking specifically to this one thing. Am I reflecting over my own heart, my own conscience, my own thought, my own ideas so that I grow those around me? Or am I only interested in the end result? I don't care about the calamity that happens in between. I have a job to do and a task to complete, and I don't care who's blown over, destroyed, or ruined along the way. In my mind, I'm placing a lot of that weight on leading to grow. I'm doing things because I have the pragmatic idea of growing my business, making transitional movement forward. So here's where I challenge you. If I can look at understanding my own self, and it goes back to the conversation of transparency or authenticity. I was given a great book this week, and I just plowed through it in one night because it was that good, and it's called Authentic Leadership. If you are looking at your own self and examine your own self for growth, that also might mean that you have to be subject to outside opinion. You have to ask people, hey, how am I doing in this area? From your understanding as a friend, how does my marriage appear to you? And sometimes your friends, though, you need to free them to be able to give you the greatest truth. So today, I hope in episode 4 in Understanding Leadership, you can look at the differences between your authoritative, your participatory, people that are active with you, your delegation or your transactional leadership. What are you giving off? Or even your transformational leadership. How can I best take the powers of each of these and really make a synergistic understanding of how I lead? Because if we are just one of these, we need to know there's high risk of failure and high risk of both fatigue and damage along the way behind us. So thank you for joining 9 Degrees North today as we spend lunch together, and hopefully have challenged you a little bit to look at how you are leading and growing your business. Thank you for joining us.